Jesus said in Matthew 21 and verse 22, "And all things, whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive." The only limitations God has placed on prayer in the New Testament are surrender to Christ and obedience to His commandments. For aside from these, prayer is no avail. We must walk with God. In Luke the 18th chapter, we're encouraged to pray and not to faint. In Romans 12 and verse 12, we're urged to continue instant in prayer. And in 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 17, we're told to pray without ceasing. Jesus Himself assures us that the effectiveness of our petitions is in proportion to the daring quality of our faith that prompts these petitions. Divine peace, which is a gift from God, belongs to every troubled heart through prayer. But the barren and empty life is the life that just does not pray. And things are happening in the lives of those who pray. Friends, we must realize that prayer is the outreach of the heart. We're not appealing to earth, but to heaven in our innermost strivings. Prayer is the reaching out of the human soul to and for the God who has promised to hear and answer prayer. God has promised to hear and answer our prayers. A minister once made the statement that he endeavored for weeks to prepare a series of lessons on the subject of prayer for a national television program. He worked, but was making absolutely no headway. Suddenly he awakened to the glaring fact that he had been trying to speak on prayer without so much as having prayed about the matter even once. The presentations on prayer had everything in them but prayer itself. He then related that after repenting of this evident folly and approaching God in prayer, the kind of prayer he was trying to tell hundreds of thousands about over the television, almost at once thoughts started pouring into his head. The results from those lessons delivered were the greatest of any previous presentation that he had delivered. We must do more than merely talk about prayer. Friends, when we only talk about prayer, we're restricting it to a mental concept or assent. The soul itself does not become involved in that, so we need to come to an understanding of what effective prayer really is. Because so many end up with dead sermons on a living power, a living prayer. Friends, we must pray. We must pray from the heart. And heaven has promised to hear. But suppose there is no message. What has heaven to hear from us? Well, folks, prayer is the avenue of help. In prayer to God, we're not left with dangling ends of insecurity and uncertainty for God, because God backs up His every promise with Himself. God says, "I'm watching over my word to perform it." He simply means what I say I will do. I will do it. This literally means what it says and what it sounds like it says. God keeps close track of His promises so that they are always kept. Titus 1 and verse 2 says emphatically that God cannot lie. It is utterly impossible for Him to do so. Consequently, what God promises will be carried out. And when we read all the promises of God related to prayer, we at once know with the fullest assurance that we may depend upon Almighty God to follow through with an answer to our prayers. David said that if he regarded iniquity in his heart, then the Lord would not hear him, Psalm 66 and verse 18. But the life conducted and lived in sincerity before God, one that is obedient to His will, has every assurance that the burdens need not be borne alone. For God is still on His throne and is but a request away from our direst need. But a simple problem that is never taken to God may well be our total undoing. Friends, we thank you for joining us for our program today, and may God bless you with a wonderful day.